well, if the men are the leadership of the church, then they're failing here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, to some degree.
Maybe.
I think at some point we reach that if the men are the leadership of the church, then yes, to some degree, they are failing the women. But to the women out there, stop waiting on them.
Welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk to everyday people about faith and work. My name is John, and if this is your first time tuning in, please take a quick moment. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, click the bell, and as you're listening to the conversation, feel free to drop some comments, some questions, and any feedback below. But today, my guest is my wife, Emily.
Hi.
What cigar are you lighting?
I have the Leather Rose, the Fat Bottom Betty.
Nice.
It's a go-to for me, for sure.
That's your favorite, right?
At the moment, yes. Kind of lit it all crooked, but it's fine. I'll survive. Pretty sure I might caught that torch lighter.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But I have a Rocky Patel, which is from a sampler that I bought, so we'll see how it goes.
We're probably making Micah cringe with our lighting abilities.
So just out of curiosity, I think you just said this. What do you think won the sound battle, me or the lighter?
Oh, I'm pretty sure the lighter.
Yeah?
Yeah, 'cause it's like...
Right in front of the mic?
Right in front of the mic.
We also have a couple of amber ales. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but you are ultimately, I guess, the genius behind all the production of the podcast.
Very novice genius, if that's a thing. But yeah.
You edit the audio, edit the video footage, schedule the episodes, make the thumbnails, do a lot of, not all, but a lot of the social media and all that kind of good stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. And as we're recording, in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's a barking dog. Gotta figure out how to get rid of that. There's a car that just drove by. How do I get rid of that? So this is going to be a lot of fun.
There's a AC running in the background.
For the audio nerds, that's a consistent noise. I can get rid of that.
How many airplanes do you think we'll have today?
What are we betting?
No, we're not betting. I'm just asking.
Oh, come on. Okay. My bet is 3.
3?
We're not winning anything, though. Yeah. Betting loses a lot of meaning when you're married to the person you're betting with.
Right. It could gain new meaning, though. Awesome.
Yep.
So we've, let me see, this summer will be 12 years of being married. So I know you. I like to think I do, at least. A lot of the people probably watching, some of them probably do know you, but a lot of them probably don't. So would you mind sharing your, as in-depth as we may have time for, but just your story, your testimony with everybody?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I grew up on the outskirts of Austin, fairly rural town. I probably graduated high school with a little over 100 people. I grew up in, I'm not sure what we called it, but John, you probably call it a compound or a commune or whatever you want to call it. Whatever word sounds best.
Both commune.
Yeah, but I grew up next to my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. We all lived on one parcel of land, one section of land. And so I had a very strong community with my family. And there's many times I missed that. But we really didn't go to church at all. My parents weren't against church. They definitely didn't, discourage us from going. And if we went and stayed at friends' houses, my older brother and I would go to church with them. And I remember hearing about God and, knowing, to the extent that a small child can understand prayer, you can pray to God, but I didn't know what that truly meant. And so growing up, I basically was in this same small town my whole life, from infancy to graduating high school. And so I had a friend the whole time I was there, one friend that I had growing up from start to beginning, or from start to end. And we're still friends now. And she used to ask me, do you want to come to church? Do you want to come to church? Do you want to come to church? And sometimes I would just be like, yes, I'll go with you. And I'd end up at church. And so she had a very godly mom. And I know she was saved at an early age. And so there's many times after I was saved that definitely we sat down together and had conversations about God as best as we could. So anyways, fast forward quite a bit. I kind of resonated with Esteban's story about the bus ministries because I had been picked up by a cousin of mine that lived up the street in a bus from a Fundamental Baptist church.
Was there goldfish?
There were no goldfish. No goldfish. I had to think about that. We had goldfish crackers, but that's the extent of it. But what this bus ministry would do is they'd drive around our little town and they'd ask the kids on the bus, do you have family members? Because it was small and, everyone knew everybody and everyone had family and all that kind of stuff right there. And so you could easily say, oh, my first cousin lives down the block. You go pick them up, and most likely the bus driver knew the parent and they say, hey, we're picking up your daughter. And so that's what happened. And I did this like I'm texting, but they'd call landlines and boring stuff like that. And so I get on this bus and I go to this Fundamental Baptist church. I had no idea what that meant at the time. I didn't even know denominations were a thing. And got involved briefly with them and ended up getting sucked into going to summer camp. And at this summer camp, we're worshiping and we're in the sanctuary singing whatever song we were singing. I have a horrible memory. And I just remember all my friends are going up to the front and I'm like, oblivious. What are we doing? And I'm like, oh, okay, we're going up to the front. I must need to go up to the front because, rule follower. So I followed them up front and all of a sudden someone's like, you're here to give your heart to Christ. And I'm like, what? I'm probably 6th, 7th grade, not understanding. At this point, had gone to church maybe a handful of times with my friend. And I'm just terrified at this point. I'm like, yes. As a scared, shy, introverted little kid, I'm just like, whatever gets me out of this situation faster is what I want to do. And so I said yes. And he asks me all these questions I don't even remember, none of which go any deeper than just me going, yes. And we go back to our bunks and, our lady sponsor that was with us, like, she's ecstatic, all excited, which I get that now, on the other side, you get excited when someone has, is following Christ, when Christ has called them. And so you get excited. And so I'm, as a little kid, sitting there going, I'm not going to let this adult down. So I lie my way through it. Like, not, honestly, I think at the time, not thinking I was lying, but I'm going like, I need to not disappoint this adult. Get home, and something's different. I don't know what it is. I don't understand the concept of conviction, the Holy Spirit moving, that Christ changes you, like those things. I don't get that. So fast forward into high school, my friend, I tell her this story and she's all excited, but we don't know what to do with it because we have no one discipling us. The closest would be her mom, and I don't see them very often. And so my friend and I would just talk about God sporadically at high school, and we'd be in the corner just like reading something and trying to figure it out and brokenly understanding these things. And I'd go to church with her because she dragged me to church. So respond to an altar call poorly. I'm now being drugged to church. If I haven't said it already, I'm an introverted person. So like, that's not something I enjoy. Go into college. I know to some degree who God is at this point. I understand the Holy Spirit to a minuscule amount. I understand what the altar call was supposed to be, but I don't know if I would have placed myself as saved on that very day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I don't know. I wouldn't have placed myself because like there was no actual, what is the word I'm looking for? Laying down of my life, Christ changing that. And there was no fruit of what was happening.
Right.
So, we joined I joined the Baptist student ministry, in Alpine my freshman year in college. And there's this speaker that comes down, and you have a better memory than me, and you might remember his name, but Mike Sutterfield. So he's in
we follow each other on social media.
Well, shout out to Mike Sutterfield, for literally laying out the death on the cross well, to where a confused freshman in college finally heard what it meant for Christ to die on the cross for me. What that action was for. Because I didn't know. I didn't know that I was sinful. I didn't know I was a wretch. I didn't know I was unsavable. I didn't know that I couldn't earn it. And then here someone is going, this is what Christ did for you. This is what Jesus did for you. This was his ministry. And because of his sacrifice, because of his calling on your life, you are saved. And the understanding of saved is I get Christ. Finally understood that. Went back to my room. We were spoiled college students because we had those suites. You had the middle living room, and we'd have our separate rooms with doors we could shut.
Basically apartments.
It was fantastic. So I go into my room and shut the door and just hit the floor and cry. At that moment, I would say I was saved. That Christ called me.
That's when your life was changed, transformed.
Yeah.
That's when you would say you started following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, hands down. And before that, I would have looked, because of who I am, I would have looked at people and I'm like, you are an energy drain and I do not want to spend my time with you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't out of a place of like, haha, I'm better than you. It was more so like, you're going to drain all the energy I have and I need it for this other thing. There was a selfishness, but there wasn't an eliteness to it, which come to find out it came off as that. And so what instantly changed was, God, why should I go and talk to that person? God, why do you want me to go and expend the little bit of energy I have on that person? Why do you want me? Why? What's your plan for them? And sometimes I got to see that pan out. Other times, I just felt like I was throwing the little bit of energy and effort I had into someone that wasn't ever going to send a response. And so that was a dramatic change in my life. I would say I viewed right away. And the rest of that continues down the line of when I meet you.
People are still draining, though.
Oh, yeah. People are still draining. And I've learned over time how to balance those things out. And I think one of your best, or not your best, but one of your favorite sayings to me was when we were going to a church in Dallas, the pastor said, I'll poorly quote it, but basically, your introversion isn't an excuse not to go and spread the gospel. Have a picnic at your house, go outside, interact with people, go in, throw up, and come back outside.
Yeah.
Some days it feels like that.
I'm going to let you light it first this time.
Oh, yeah? Ready? Hang on. ASMR, right?
So, in addition to, yes, you are an introvert. Yes, people are draining. But you look at it through like a different lens now. Yeah. And so it's not like you're draining, push people back, but it's like, you're draining, but my life has a different purpose now.
Yeah. It's not an individual life.
Right. My life has a different purpose now. I've I'm a part of God's family now. And so like, yes, it is draining, but like this work here is worth it. So I'm not going to pull away from it. And like, I think finding the balance probably is always work. It's always in progress.
Yeah.
And so is there anything else that you could say that you noticed a change in and how you viewed just life in general? And it doesn't have to be like introvert related.
Yeah.
Because like the reason I'm asking is because like one of the things I just like to make a point of, and you know this, is that like when you're in this new life, right, as a follower of Christ, God has saved you. A lot of times we talk about like when we talk about repentance and sanctification and that kind of thing, it's always like, well, we stop doing all these bad things.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm not going to have sex anymore. I'm not going to like cuss anymore. I'm not going to do these things. But it's not about what you just stop doing, but it's about what you start doing. It's also about like how some things just change.
No, the biggest change, unless you want to point something directly to me that you've noticed, because there's a lot of things I know you probably noticed that I don't even see. But what was strange for me is I always like to joke that my parents were lucky because my brother and I were good kids.
Yeah.
I mean, we argued like normal kids argued. My brother did a couple of stupid things, but nothing, except for the one, but nothing like earth-shatteringly bad. We didn't sneak out, to my knowledge. My brother, to my knowledge, I'm not going to speak for my brother, but I never saw or heard if he did. And I don't think he did. But we weren't sneaking out getting drinks. We weren't smoking. Well, now, but like we weren't doing
but
drugs.
We're smoking to the glory of God now.
I know, right? And like whatever, this is healthier. But it's really not. But we weren't doing those things. And so when Christ called me, the biggest thing that I had, well, there is another one that I really don't want to get into, but the biggest thing that I had to lay down was my personality of introversion. Is I don't want to be around people. So all of a sudden I was like, I need to be around people.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted and I'm selfish with my time. So I had to lay down that selfishness with my time and give it to other people. And sometimes to the sacrifice of, which I've learned other ways, but sometimes to the sacrifice of myself. At times I had to lay down my idea of what I wanted to do. Which maybe, again, dug into personality, is I wanted to be in range and wildlife. I was going to go, in my mind, I was going to go work on a landowner's ranch alone by myself, forever by myself. The end. I was okay not being married. I was okay just going. Yeah. Then I realized probably a couple of years into college, like, that's not good for me. When I'm alone for too long, I know depression kicks in. I know that selfishness dives back in. I know that sin is easier to fall into alone. And so I changed majors. I became a psychology major, and then I even had to lay that down because I wanted to go and get my LPC. I wanted to counsel. I'd still love to go into trauma counseling, but it just didn't go the way God planned. And when we went into church planning, it just didn't make sense. Do I use those skills? Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let me figure out how to ask this.
If you ask.
So you're not, so more so let me start by making a statement. Or so what you're saying is, so we're not saying that being an introvert is a sin.
No.
We're not saying that it's bad.
No.
Have you wrestled with having to figure that out? Are there times where you thought maybe this is something that's wrong with me that needs to be fixed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And how have you tried navigating through that?
Well, because, like, there's many times when I've been told...
Like, I used to make the joke that, like, what's wrong with you? Why are y'all so weird?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's many times I was told that, oh, you just need to learn how to get over it. Or you really need to go and be around other people. You'll just learn how to do it. And, like, to some degree that's true, but it isn't just throwing yourself in there until you drowned. It's dipping your feet in, figuring out, okay, this works, this doesn't work. Walking into the water up to your knees, going, this kind of works. Yeah, I cannot handle this much. So let's go this way. Getting a little bit further, waist deep, until you can swim and actually figure out, okay, I'm going to go over here and do this thing. I'm feeling exhausted. I need to go over here and do this. And so you're learning how to balance those things out. And once I figured out that it wasn't, I need to be like John, I need to be who God has called me to be within the personality that I have. Not using it as a crutch to escape things, but to know where He's called me to go. For example, when we first moved back to Alpine, we did that block party.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
It was miserable.
That was fun.
But you wanted to go to door.
I didn't. Well,
yeah.
Okay, so hold on.
No.
Wait. I didn't want to go door to door. I knew that we needed to go door to door.
Okay, so you knew that we needed to go door to door.
Yeah.
Knocking on random strangers' doors because we hadn't met our neighbors yet. And so you asked me to go with you. I did not want to go, but I went. Yeah. It was one of the, I would put it up there, one of the worst things that I've done. I will never do it again unless Christ says go and do it. Because every door we walked up to was so physically draining and nerve-wracking and terrifying. I mean, like, you may as well have just thrown me to drown. Like, and I'm not placing that on you, but like, it was a learning experience. Like, I'm not good at this, and that's okay. I'm great over in these other areas. I am not a knock on the door, hey, come to our block party, but I will set up every table, and I will put all the stuff on it, and I will organize it, and I will make sure everything's good. I will hospitality the hell out of things.
Does that include make a casserole?
As Carrie said, I can make the casserole. I don't always make it.
You're not the casserole lady.
I am not the casserole lady.
That's cool. They all taste the same.
Yeah, they're all basically condensed chicken, cream chicken and mushroom and noodles. But like, I'm not the door knocker.
Yeah.
And that's okay. If there's not someone else to knock on the door,
if there's not someone else to do, you'll do it.
I will do it.
Yeah.
Because God says go. But that's not my calling.
So one of the way that I looked at that situation, one of the way I look at a lot of things is, okay, so like, we're going to do the block party. We need to go knock on doors and invite people, that kind of thing. Because that was the idea, right? We want to invite our neighbors, to get to know our neighbors and that kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so, like, knocking on strangers' doors is not a lot of fun because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know if there was a no soliciting sign that you didn't see. Like, you just don't know what's going on.
Whether or not you're mistaken as Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, there's so many different things. But like, for me, I was like, I can go and do that because I'm like, okay, this is only going to take an hour. This is only going to suck for an hour. Like, it can suck for an hour. Life is a lot longer than 1 hour.
It is.
And does that help? Or is it just still suck no matter what?
It's going to take the same amount of energy either way.
Yeah.
And so...
Can you psych yourself up for it?
Certain things I can go, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, let's go. Like, internally, right? I have a very loud internal dialogue most days. To a distracting degree. But there is a point where I can go, let's go. Like, this has to get done, let's go. But it's when it's thrown on me spur of the moment and I can't go, let's go and do this 1 hour thing and then go chill by ourselves and recoup for 3 hours.
Yeah.
If it's thrown on me and then I've got 6 other things, like, I'm going to be a miserable human being the rest of the day. And I'm not talking like attitude-wise. Like internally, I'm stressed.
Yeah.
I can't think correctly. I can't speak to people correctly. I can't hold a conversation. Like, I will be so out of it that I am no use. And that's taken years to figure out.
Yeah. I think that's probably the big difference.
Yeah.
Between, I guess, how you're wired and probably how I am, is because, like, that's going to be, that for me, like, that was probably the most awkward for, like, the first 2 or 3 doors, but, like, I got over it. And then the rest of the day is, like, I'm not drained after those things.
Yeah. Well, and I can say to any church planners out there, coming from someone that's terrified to go do that, go and do that. Like, I understand, and, like, Ross has done that.
Yeah.
Go and do that. That is one of the most beneficial things you can do. Go 2 to 3 neighbors down and meet them. Because when we did that, you met a mom that needed help. You met a libertarian guy that you ended up having coffee with and talking
so awesome.
about weird random things. People hung out in our backyard. We had the 2 men that moved in next door. Mm-hmm. Right before we got to meet them.
Yeah.
And so...
And a lot of other people.
Yeah. People started waving at us all of a sudden.
So, like, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't go with you. I would sit on the porch and wave at them. I guess this is one of those things, like, when you get married, like, I'm going to benefit from some of the things that Christ tells you to go and do, and vice versa.
So I'm trying to remember what my mindset was, where I basically didn't make you do it. I just
strongly encouraged
you to do it. And I think part of my mindset was, well, one, we're a team.
Yeah.
And the other part of it was, I don't know whose door I'm going to knock on. Having a woman there next to me is going to make other people feel who I'll open the door who probably wouldn't have opened it.
It instantly takes your creep factor down.
That's what it was.
At the time, I didn't have blue hair either, so.
Yeah, it took my creep factor away.
Anyways. So yeah, learning to, I guess if I could wrap that kind of like thought up, learning to work with my personality instead of fighting against it to be what other people expect of you is probably what I've learned the most, is how to work along.
Would it be fair to say you're no longer trying to be who people think you need to be, but like you're being who you need to be in situations? Yeah.
I mean, not to sound so cliche, but yeah, I'm actually trying to be who I am instead of who other people are dictating that I should be. Yeah. I'm an individual. But yeah.
I like that you brought that example up, though, because that was one of the more, I don't know if fun's the right way to talk about it, but like just that little thing that we did, because it wasn't huge. I think we might have like maybe had 20 people come to our house.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And they were all strangers.
And they were all, that's the thing, is like they were all
terrifying.
Strangers. That's what made it cool.
Yeah.
They were all strangers. They're people most people that showed up didn't even answer the door. I just left a little invite on the door. And they either showed up without saying anything, which is cool, or they texted back and said, hey, thanks for the invite. We'd love to come. Can we bring something? Mm-hmm. And then there's other people who didn't need to do this, but it's thoughtful. They texted me back and said, hey, we can't make it.
Which was sweet.
Yeah. But like there was people who lived next to us who we had no idea who they were.
Yeah.
People who work for the schools, people who own businesses, people who are retired.
Well, that interaction actually came in handy because you met someone that worked for the school district.
Yeah.
And later we worked alongside the school district.
Yeah. And like people who when they drove by, they started honking and waving. Mm-hmm. When they were walking their dogs, they would wave. But like a month later, because I made a brisket.
Yeah.
One of the guys thought the brisket was phenomenal. Understandably so. I saw him in the parking lot like 4 or 6 weeks later. He's like, hey, I've got a barbecue sauce for you.
Nice.
And he had it with him, which was interesting.
It's like he's just carrying around this barbecue sauce, like waiting to meet you.
That he would make, he was his recipe to give it to me. And, I mean, like, like you said, there's people we got to minister to and just all sorts of different things like that. The man you referenced, mm-hmm. Me and him went and had coffee for like 8 hours.
Yeah. I thought you went missing.
That was something.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, that was That was fun. So I guess that's a natural transition to what I wanted to ask you, which was just about what you thought about our time church planting, what it was like being like, I guess, a church planter's wife and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, one, the cicadas have taken off, so it's already getting hot in Texas.
It's always hot.
We can unpack this more, but to sum it all up, it was a lot. It was worse than what I was warned. Definitely.
Which is incredible because we had really good warnings.
Yeah, yeah. When we went to the trainings, they were like, church planting is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But it was worse than what I thought. I'm not saying we're... It was good. We'll get there. That's why I said we can unpack it. Hang on, wait. Let me do the Trump thing. It was good, but we can unpack it. But... lost my train of thought now.
It was worse than they told you it was going to be.
Yeah, so it was worse than what they told me it was going to be. And I'm not going to sit here and say that we're special cases, because you've interviewed Ross, and his wife Tanya has shared similar things.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you do rural church planting, let me make sure I pronounce that correctly with my accent. Rural church planting. It is isolating.
Yeah.
Now, Ross has had a slightly different experience, because he shared that he didn't, he got some of that, but it didn't seem as bad. And thank God for that.
Yeah.
Because where we were, for me, there was no discipleship. And I was still pretty young in my faith, because we went into church planting maybe 4 or 5 years after we graduated college. So I'd been a Christian barely. Like, I hadn't really started taking theology seriously until we started church planting. So maybe
until I went to the coast.
So all of a sudden, I got serious, and I got really serious into church planting and politics when John went on a missions trip with our church students.
Yeah.
And I was like, all of a sudden, I care when John's not around. So I didn't get serious about my theology and serious about discipleship and things of that nature until probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Into church planting. And there was no one to disciple.
You.
Me.
Yeah.
And at this point, you haven't interviewed him yet. The invitation's out there. But Kent Barlow, who's been on the eschatology chats, was probably the closest person to a discipler I'd ever had.
Yeah.
And then here we are in these realms that are going like, you can't have a man as your discipler, right? Technically, it's okay. But like, you know what I'm trying to say, though?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to say, like, if I sit down with Kent and have a conversation with him, like, that's a sin.
No, yeah.
But what I'm saying is consistently meeting with that man over and over again, like,
especially like one-on-one
and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's very much so frowned upon. And so for me, I'm like, okay, there's probably wisdom in that. So I need to look for this lady in a dry place where it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, partially we should have kind of known that, because to some degree we went back because there weren't solid churches.
Right.
And so I should have to some degree known. And did I have women that I could reach out through technology? Yeah. It is not the same.
Right.
Were
those women that could have discipled you?
Yeah. And they could have. Right. And I did. I talked to some of them. But when a college student does something stupid and it's reflected back on you and you're sitting there crying it out and you're like, I really wish I had someone to meet it for coffee right now.
Right.
Like that one-on-one, person-to-person. And so it was extremely difficult. The reward in that was I started to dig into church history. I started to dig into the guys you guys talk about. I started to read stuff from Spurgeon, from Calvin, from Chesterton, all of those kinds of things. I started, and I was like, these guys have wives.
Yeah.
Where are their wives?
Yeah.
What were they doing? What were they writing? Who were, And so I got this really nerdy theology book about the women of the Reformation, and it's like 2 volumes this thick. And I'm learning who they were and what they did. And so, yeah. So that was the difficulties of church planting for me personally. The blessings of it, we were in a small town. We got to work with the same college students consistently. And we got to be in their lives. We got to know them exceptionally well. We got to meet them at the coffee shops, and just in ways that a large city would not have. We got to some degree, knock on doors, and our neighbors actually wave at us. And we saw them at the grocery store a lot because there was only like 2, technically 1, but 2 grocery stores. It was a huge blessing. And through the struggles of church planting, I have definitely grown, and God has set those firm foundation, that firm foundation underneath me, to where I'm slowly was able to step forward in solid theology. And to this day, like, I do seek out other women to feed into my life. But I've realized that if they're not there, I don't have to flounder. If they're not there, there's still things I can do. I can go and read the scriptures and then go read the commentaries and figure it out and then bounce it off of you or in a group of people. And so I became very, capable person through that. And I look at it now and would never wish to go through that suffering again. But I look at it now and go, because of that suffering, I am this. And so where we are now, there's some amazing women around us. And I'm building those relationships. Am I necessarily in that discipleship role as the person being discipled? Not all the time. But I've reached a position where I can do the both. The big struggle now is I'm so used to being discipled around men that it's difficult to fit in being discipled around women. So that's a whole nother story. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, long story short.
Not to put you on blast, but I guess put you on blast.
Yeah, go for it.
What are some of the favorite women that you read about?
Oh man, the I was to say a cliche one, but the overly known one is Corrie ten Boom.
Yeah.
I finally read The Hiding Place. Fantastic. And her story and the way that she was raised, and it was just, through that atrocity, a beautiful story of how Christ works. Who is the woman that used to drive Calvin insane?
She's on the Wall of Reformation now.
Mm-hmm. She's the only woman on the Wall of Reformation.
Yeah.
And I'll find her name and I'll pop it up on the screen or something. But there's these letters that she used to write back and forth to Calvin.
Yeah.
And when she died, basically he referred to her as, in our terminology, as frustrating and annoying.
Yeah.
But he had great respect for her.
Yeah.
And even at her time, she would have been seen as overstepping the bounds of what women should be doing. But she did it graciously.
Right.
And she did it where it was needed. And so there's these pillars. And even, I think it was King Henry VIII, his wife, and how she influenced him to the point that when she died, he just lost it. In the ways in which women influence through being feminine.
Yeah.
Some things I've learned, but yeah.
That's kind of, I think, one of the cool things about how whenever you're reading a lot of the stories, and because I wasn't reading the books, but you'd come back, we would talk about them afterwards. Yeah. And I think what was really fascinating about a lot of those stories is, one, they did really phenomenal, great things in their lives. A lot of really great things that were used by God for the gospel, and that changed the lives of the people in like their context, their city, their places where they lived. And so much of what they did through like embracing, I guess, their femininity.
Yes.
Instead of trying to mimic men, which is what we see a lot like with our culture today.
Which we can get into that. I can give you a quick story.
Go for it.
Because I'm the editor, I can pop this up, but just a warning. I have a horrible recall, and so I'll get the names and I'll put them out there. But during, I want to say, either the edge of the start of the Reformation, before the thesis was nailed, there was a queen who opened up the banquet hall.
Yeah.
To the what would have been the palace. She routinely fed the poor.
Right.
And that was uncommon. Before her, the doors were shut.
Right.
And one of her goals was to follow what God has called. And she, at the time, would get her hands on scripture, which at this time, it's exceptionally rare to have printed during her time. It was exceptionally rare to have the scriptures, and she had it in multiple languages. And she would sit and read to the king the Gospels. She would sit and read them because she could read. And when he would be done doing what he was doing for the day, they'd come back and she would read to him. And because of those readings, he would act more graciously.
Yeah.
And she was allowed to be hospitable.
Right.
She was allowed to invite people in. She was allowed to go out and care medically for people. She was allowed to go and do these things in a time where women weren't really supposed to do that. And of her class, how dare she interact with these people? And so there is a way to be feminine and serve.
Yeah.
What that looks like may change. It obviously varies, but it's possible. You just have to figure it out. How is God calling you to do that? And so that's my tangent. Oh yeah, I should have said at the beginning. Courtesy of Micah.
Yes.
This was editor's pay.
He set you up well.
Yeah. So yeah, but I'll find those names. I'll share them in the chat because it's worth learning. And Google the names, and you'll find a shorter article on these women. Again, I'm reading.
We can put some links in the comments.
Yeah, I definitely will. But
or the description, sorry.
Yeah, I'm reading. You have to be a history buff, and you have to geek out on this stuff. And yeah, so just go find the article about these women, and you'll learn enough. But yeah.
So basically, to sum it up, what you couldn't find from the living women, you found from the women of the past.
Yes.
So, and like you said, we're in a different situation now than we were before. So there's different women around. You said we're surrounded by there's some solid women that we do life with.
Yeah.
So how has that impacted and changed how you desire and strive to disciple and pour into other women?
It definitely puts a little bit more of a fire behind it of, I don't want that for other women. I'm going to cry on the podcast now. It's my turn.
That's good. What makes you feel better, the only person that's crying on the podcast is a man.
I know. It's my turn to cry, Antonio. But I don't know. I don't want other women to go through that. To have to sit there and go, well, I guess I have to figure this out. When literally we're told, go find someone to disciple you. Go find someone to disciple you. And it's you and God.
Yeah.
You and the Holy Spirit's leading. And And to be able to now take what I've learned and go, I'm going to impact the lives of the ladies in front of me.
Yeah.
Because that matters. And so it definitely puts a fire behind you of like, I want to go and do that. I want to go and spend time. And as exhausting as it is, I extend myself out there because I'm like, that was miserable. And I don't want that for you. So let's get you on solid ground so you can go and disciple someone else. And this may not be the direction we're going to go, but like I hit a point when I was going through this where I'm like, well, if the men are the leadership of the church, then they're failing here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, to some degree. Maybe. I think at some point we reach that if the men are the leadership of the church, then yes, to some degree, they are failing the women. But to the women out there, stop waiting on them. And I don't mean usurp their authority in the church. I do not mean step in and be rude and not be feminine and those kinds of things. I mean, God has called you to disciple. He didn't say, go and ask the elder of the church. Don't go ask, he didn't say, go ask your pastor's permission to go disciple first. Go and disciple that woman. It's in scripture. If you get questioned, let's sit down and open the Bible.
So basically saying it's not an excuse to be stagnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, don't sit here and blame the leadership of your church for your lack of ability to go and disciple another woman. Yeah. It's like once that finally clicked, I'm like, oh, wait on me. God, take that. I'm going to go and do that now. I'm going to go and disciple because I can't sit around and blame someone else for what you've called me to do. And my inaction is why I'm not doing it. And so the amount of women I have met who don't engage or, tiptoe around that, they tend to blame the men of the church. And I could talk for hours about that. And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to lay most of the weight on the women. But I've met a lot of women who are like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. The authority of the man. And I don't say that to be disrespectful.
Right, you're not belittling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, they're broken sinful. You're broken sinful. They're being called to do something. You've been called to do something. Go and do that thing. Raise the women up in the church. Teach them, as scripture says, to love their husbands well, to raise their children well, and to serve the church, and to raise up other women among the other things that women are called to do. And, I mean, you just don't see it a lot. And I pray for the day that they stop necessarily baking the casseroles and they start discipling, which discipleship can happen when baking cookies, like whatever. But
we never want women to stop baking cookies.
They should always bake a cookie or a pie. I mean, we know a lady that made a mean apple pie the other day, so.
Her snickerdoodle cookies were outstanding.
But like, for the sake of being comical though, like, stop making the casserole, sit down with your Bible with another woman and go, this is who God says we are. But anyways, continuing on.
No, we're good. So, speaking of we're good, some of the good.
Yeah. Let's see, some of the good. That one's hard. The counselor, psychologist in my head's like, you focus on the negative because that's what we focus on. I mean, we saw... You want this?
Lighter.
Oh, sneaky. I don't know, jog my memory. Because there are good.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good. Why do I have to jog your memory on the good?
Because it's been so long and the bad sticks.
That's why I don't understand why people say that I'm the pessimist.
Oh, yeah. For everyone,
I'm the pessimist and I'm the mean one.
For everyone out there who thinks I'm not the pessimist, you just haven't figured it out yet. I'm the pessimist in this relationship. Yeah. But I mean, some of the good is we had some students that we got to see raise up in the church.
Right.
I got to awkwardly stumble through discipling a couple of young women poorly, but I did. God put one of our friends in Leander, in connection with me for about a year. And we had a weekly call every week, obviously, weekly call. And the wisdom that was shared there was worthwhile. And I might not have meant that. While we were church planning, one of his provisions was a job. I don't know if this is the direction you were pointing towards, but when we first moved to Alpine, God laid out a job working for the university there.
That was cool.
And it was fantastic. And it was one of the first times that my boss was a Christian.
Right.
And a man. At that point, it was like, all right, God, I get this. But like I'd gone in for that interview and, the typical interview, like, why do you want this job? What do you know about technology? Blah, 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 blah. Got the job, but then I get a call from the executive that I would be the assistant under. He's like, this is not an interview. This is not a second interview. We just need to talk. And I was like, second interview. Like, when I get there, it's this conversation with him about, why are you here? Why Alpine? Why this job? This job doesn't pay well, and you're coming from Dallas, and your resume shows you're worth more than this. And I'm like, do I tell him the truth? Hey man, we sold our house, moved from Dallas, where we had good jobs. I had just been promoted. I was a team lead.
On the verge of being promoted to next level management. Applying
to be a VP, yeah. Like, we moved here because we wanted to just short of bankrupt ourselves so we could plan a church. And I'm going to work as your assistant, getting paid, at least 50% less than what I was making? Or do I tell him, I just love this job. I can't wait to be an assistant here. And, I just love the scenery of Alpine, which I do. And there was just something that said, like, just tell him the truth. And I did. And, he was a believer. And this was one of those situations that I had the skill to do the job. I was hireable. And then I was overqualified. And I got hired based off of that.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't an interview.
Yeah.
It was a conversation.
Right.
We're going to leave it at that. But like, it was a conversation. And it ended up being one of the best jobs I had one of the best jobs I had while we were out there, where God had placed me in a particular place to basically work in a boring IT department who wanted to see students in the office. So you have the IT department, the executives of that, boring, stuffy office, and they're like, we watch students walk past our windows every day and they never come through the door. We never get to interact. We never talk to them, and to some degree, some of them that were in the office didn't care to talk to him, and that's okay. But he wanted to, and I wanted to. So we got a student worker, and she worked with us. And through her, other students came in, and all of a sudden we start getting to know all these students. And
ministry happened.
Like, surprise, when you get involved in someone's life, like, ministry happened. They ended up going to our house. We ended up helping them through things. There's a few times that they'd come in with problems, and I'd talk them through it.
Yeah.
And so those were amazing things that God got to do. And was it exhausting? Yes, it was. And only in a small town. There was one time you had gone out of town and I had locked my keys in the house. And I texted my boss and I'm like, I'm going to be late. I locked my keys in the house and I can't get in, and my husband's gone. I can't drive to work. I'm walking. He was already at work, drove back, picked me up, and drove me to work. So that was kind of funny. But getting to build those kinds of relationships, outstanding. I'll go off on another tangent if I head that direction, but getting to go to the church planning conferences and sitting there and being taught what it is to do ministry and learning how to network in a biblical way and basically just gleaning all this information in all at one time and being able to take it back and do those things was amazing. But one of the biggest things and the most tiring things was relationships.
Yeah.
We built amazing relationships, and actually getting to use my psychology degree when students would call in the middle of the night, or, hey, I'm going through a panic attack and I'm sitting at the park alone and it's midnight.
Yeah.
And I get a phone call from a crying high school student and I'm like, I don't want to go. But God, I'm here for that. And so in the middle of the night in our small little town, I would drive to the park and sit with this person, and getting to do those kinds of things because of what God had called us to do. So those are some of the positives for me. A lot of them are relationship based. Growing into the calling there, it was realizing that hospitality is something I enjoy, which I found that out through the job I had gotten when we moved back.
Beer.
Through beer. And yeah, so learning about customer service and hospitality and enjoying those kinds of things, definitely might not have learned if I would have stayed in corporate cubicle life.
Being a cog in the system.
A cog. Yeah. And so, it was 2 years I worked for the brewery?
Yeah, about.
Yeah.
I was forbidden to drink.
Yeah, John couldn't drink, and
the good old SBC didn't care if you did.
Yeah, I could drink. That's great.
But I couldn't.
Yeah, it was great. Like, one of the perks of working for this brewery.
They had phenomenal products.
I mean, walls of medals.
Yeah.
First place medals. Globally. They had a banner the first year I started. Best Hefeweizen in the world.
And they had the medal to prove it.
And it was good. It wasn't like Elf where he walks in and he's like, congratulations, you've got the best cup of coffee. It was outstanding.
Yeah.
And getting to know those people. I had never drank beer before. When I was hired, it was like, you're going to have to learn how to appreciate something you don't enjoy. And I'm like, I can do that. This was after owning my own food truck.
We can go back to that later.
We can hop back to that. But working for that brewery was one of the first places where I didn't have someone there that was a believer or someone there that claimed God.
Yeah.
You know, the cultural Christian. They were agnostic, atheist, pagan. None of them faked claimed God. And here I am, the Christian who really doesn't drink that much because I just hadn't figured out what I liked. And I definitely didn't drink beer. Wanting to work for a brewery that paid really well. And working in a tap room and getting my Cicerone license, which if you want to learn about beer, like, go ahead and take that. Go get your license. It's not that much, but it's a lot of fun. And that test that they make you do to get the license was the hardest test I've ever taken. Which is hilarious. But I failed it the first time around because it's like, you cannot think. You have to just know it. And you got to click and click and click and click. And so you pass it. And so you know all these random things about beer. And so people would come into our vacation destination, basically, and they'd ask you every question in the world about these beer. And I'm just sitting there engaging, and I have to, smile and be happy and be a good customer service person. And that was exhausting. But it taught me that I could. And during those times, my coworker would just be in a horrible mood. And I'd, like, okay, this is how I'm going to show Christ here. Let me serve my coworker which I'm not going to tell her stories, but like, who's going through something really bad. And I'm like, okay, how do I lift that weight? How do I show her that love? And doing that. And then having you come in there and, we're allowed to give you a free glass of beer, and you're like, no, I can't have it. People way over here won't let me have it. And they're
500 miles away.
Yeah, they're like, they'll never know. And you're like, it's fine. Like, that meant a lot to them, because all of a sudden, there's someone there in front of them that's like, I've made this decision and I'm going to stick to it. First encounter with someone that was completely trashed. In trying, you have two women working behind the bar, and you have this grown man who's drunk, and he worked for the brewery, and he's coming behind the bar getting beer. Like, what do you do?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That guy.
And just learning how to deal with that. And then through that interaction, making a connection with that person, which came in later when we had someone stay at our house who was in an abusive relationship and needs somewhere safe to go.
That's right.
Yeah. Because of beer. So, that's that. I think you interviewed Zach, which is, a podcast that is one of our clients. And there's
the other Zach.
The other Zach.
Yeah.
Not the Zach that just came on, but the first Zach, the Salty Saints Zach and Randy. They have this understanding. I think it's like the telephone thing, where it's like someone says something that says something and it doesn't come out the same. They think that I can brew beer.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, let's clear the air. I know about beer. I know how it's made. I can talk about all the different styles and types. I cannot brew it.
Yeah.
One thing I learned while working for this brewery is there's so much science that goes into it, and I'm not interested in learning that.
Just human sciences.
But anyways, so all that to say, worked for Big Ben Brewery, and then when I think about 2 years in, the brewery goes under because of long story, but the brewery goes under, and our VP is like, here's your basically 2-month warning that in December you're not going to have a job. Start applying. So we do. We're about to lose funding for the church. I'm our primary income. You're currently working, almost 3 jobs at the time?
Yeah, trying to build a business, yeah.
We're barely seeing each other.
Church plant.
Because you're working night shift and I'm working late afternoon.
Yeah.
And so,
when we spent time together, I would go hang out at the brewery.
Yeah, basically. And so we would just cross each other on the road.
By the way, some people thought we were considering a divorce in that moment.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, no, not happening.
Yeah. Morons. Mind your business.
Stop it. So, where was I going with that? So the brewery's going under, right? and we're about to lose our primary income. We're not going to be able to pay rent. I'm throwing my resume out there, which should have gotten me a job. I have confidence in my resume, and I'm not trying to be boastful. They're just not coming in.
Yeah.
We're not getting jobs. And we, can't afford the house that we're going to be in. But at the same time...
It was so affordable.
It was amazing. Yeah, compared to where we're at now. But, we can't afford the house we're going to be in. But, one of my coworkers had owned a home. And they were moving.
Yeah.
And we were going to rent their house.
Yeah.
But, we just couldn't... If we couldn't find a job, then we can't rent the house. So, what are we going to do? And we ended up moving in with my parents for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the biggest lessons, through the church planning stuff that we had learned, is when things got hard, we ran.
Right.
And it's when things got hard, you lean in on Christ. And you give people time to pray. You give God a time to respond. And we were like, well,
you give other people, I think, what you just said, you give other people time to pray and respond and allow them the opportunity to be obedient to what God is leading them to do. And we didn't really do that.
We did not do that.
So I'd like to hop over from there.
Yeah.
Because all the really awesome stories you're sharing about the things we did in ministry.
They're not what I'm shooting for.
No, they are, but they make me think of other things.
Oh, please.
Because those are all great stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
The great stories.
Yeah.
The things that God called us to do. Things He opened up for us to do. So there's so much. For when I think about some of my favorite times of us church planting in Alpine.
Yeah.
These are not my stories, this is your story, but I think you have stories within this. For the most part, with the exception of some personal things.
Yeah.
That this isn't what this is what the subject's about.
Yeah.
But I had a blast church planting during COVID.
Oh, yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that fed all the introversion in me.
That's not what I'm getting at. But how was that for you?
I was an essential worker. So...
I made myself essential.
Yeah, that's true. So, a caveat. What I've learned over the course of my life, which isn't very long to be in my age, being someone...
You're over 30.
Yeah, who is dyslexic, it can be difficult to lay out a timeline, right? And we've talked about this a lot, but just the reason why I'm leaning into you to be please jog my memory. A lot of times I don't recall well. And a lot of times something that happened 5 years here, but this happened prior to that, I struggled to line it up. So, yes to that. COVID was interesting because we had moved back to Alpine at that point. And one of the reasons we had moved back is one of the relationships that we had started when we first moved to church plant was with a coffee shop owner couple.
Yeah.
And we had kept that relationship, right? And because of them, I was I wonder if Cedar Coffee has a position open because we were looking at moving back. And I reached out to one of the owners and he was like, yeah, we'll hire you. How's this much sound? And I was like, Cool. It was more than what I was making at the brewery that I was at in Blanco. And, which, side note, a lot of times if you work for tap rooms, part of your pay is to take home beer. So we always had beer when I worked for breweries. Now we have to buy our beer.
Lame.
So we go back and I'm working at this coffee shop, right? Which that's a whole nother exhausting adventure. Because
you learned about lizard people.
Yeah, it is where I learned about lizard people and astrology and flat earth and yeah, that stuff.
You were used to being around sphere earthers.
sphere earthers. That's going to be a hard S on the mic. But yeah, if you ever want to test out your limits as an introvert, go work at a coffee shop. It's, whew. So anyways, so I'm working for this coffee shop and COVID hits.
Yeah.
And like,
COVID hit. You working for? No. Okay.
So yeah. I'm the one that struggles with timelines, sir.
So, yeah, we had that joke.
Yeah. So I remember one of the mornings as we're really struggling, to figure out whether or not we're even going to open. So we're trying to figure out the doors, if we're even going to open up and serve coffee.
Yeah.
Maybe we can pass it through the window. And this is at the time when they're like, oh, the virus can be transmitted on surfaces and even on stainless steel. Like,
take your shoes off.
Yeah, like spray your groceries down, like all that crazy nonsense. But thank God we were in rural Texas.
Yeah.
Because
all that stuff is ridiculous.
For all of you that dealt with COVID in a big city, like,
I'm sorry.
like, yeah, honor to that. But so I walk in and the owners and the other workers there, which I have a completely different viewpoint of it. I'm like walking in like, let's do this. Like, I've already psyched myself up to like, I'm gonna be fine, and if I get COVID and die, like, it's in God's will. I'm not going to go out of my way to be like reckless, but like whatever. And so I walk in and like all of the tables and chairs are gone. And like some of them are pushed up against the wall. Some of them are shoved into the storage closet. And I'm like, this is really weird. The bookstore it was connected to didn't even open. It was an older woman that owned it. And I'm just like, this is uncomfortable. And this is before they were like, wear your mask, which I don't know what I would have done. And so I'm just caught off guard. And people are walking in, staring at this very unwelcoming, empty space. And they're like, can I get my cup of coffee? Can I sit? And you're like, no, you can't stay. And like things just ramp up. And at this time, I had applied to go work for a crisis center. And I went in for the interview and I got the job to work for this family crisis center. And so right as COVID is really ramping up and this coffee shop is just clearing out all of its space and it actually shut down, which part of me, like the selfish part of me is like, I should have stayed because the owners are amazing people. And they were like, we're going to take a week-long vacation and we're going to pay you. And like, yeah. So I leave before they do that. The selfish part of me is like, but like they were good Christian people. And so they cared for their employees. But at that time I got another job. So I go work for this crisis center who happens to be literally right next to where we now have church, the building.
Right, we were renting.
Yeah. And so we ended up having like these amazing relationships going back and forth with the crisis center because, as you said, COVID was an amazing time for the church because we were able to open a food pantry, right. An emergency food pantry. We were able to provide essentials. The church actually put out notifications to the city. The college students need toothpaste and toilet paper and stuff like that. And during a time when toilet paper was a shortage. For some unknown reason. And even our grocery store, they were tearing the packages open and you could only buy it per roll. Yeah. Like people were giving freely of their toilet paper. and so the coffee shop allowed us to collect it. Yep. That relationship there. And we would, when things would come in to the crisis center and vice versa, like we would share things back and forth. And so it worked really well. Or like when the food pantries, the food banks would get extra donations when like one time we had, 500 pounds of potatoes that came in. It was insane. Like I didn't know what to do with all the potatoes. And then And in the same situation with tomatoes. And it's like the sheriff came by and I got to meet the sheriff and his deputies because they had all these tomatoes that were given and they were about to drive them down to Terlingua for us. And like, I got to meet the Sanderson people because of that, the deputies and one of the pastors there. And like making these connections because of this awesome job because of COVID. Like, I can't share too many details about her, but like there was a woman in Sanderson that was going through some horrible things.
Right. And
as the representative of the crisis center, I had to be in Sanderson, this tiny little town with nothing in it, and got to spend time with the pastor and his wife there and serve food to their community through their church and love on this woman and get her connected with help. And I mean, I was there in her home as she's collecting her things to leave an abusive relationship with the sheriff's deputies in Sanderson. Not in the town we went to church plant in. And I still get messages from them today.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it's just amazing how God used COVID, which shut everything else down, and then opened up all these avenues. So, do you have more of that story?
It's not my story.
Well, we're kind of at the point where it's cliche, our story.
Right. No, it was just an interesting time. And I think because of your the position you had with the Family Christ Center, it opened up a whole lot of doors. Yeah. Some of them probably seemed natural because of the nature of the work. Mm-hmm. Others of them seemed a little bit more
the church got to help a lot of women.
Yeah.
Which, if you're church planning, not to cut you off, if you're church planning, connect with your local crisis center. Like, they need help. And the women there need somebody.
Right. And some of the younger women that were part of the church got to volunteer and help out in different areas.
Yeah. And the guys got to help too.
Right.
But yeah.
And I think we had some pre-existing relationships with them.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Because we had called them, arranged meetings, and made us available. And so occasionally we'd get calls from them beforehand. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that was cool about you working there is because I think during our earlier years, I think we were, what other people had said to me is that we were overly hard on ourselves because we were hard on ourselves for how we had handled, hardships, right? Like with the brewery closing down and that kind of thing. We were some people have told me that we were way too hard on ourselves for how we handled that. Yeah. Which I appreciate that. But one of your, I don't know if it was if this person is your boss, but she was a longer tenured person at the Christ Center, had told you, and this is probably one of the biggest compliments I think you or I could ever get, but they told us during we would call the peak of the pandemic. Yeah. She had told us that one of the things that was different about us from other people was when other people ran off, we would run in. Yeah. And that meant the world to me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She was because I think because of the way we handled the situation. Yeah. And that's not like a boastful brag. But
it was eye-opening.
A memory. It was a memory. It was eye-opening for how things were going. And to me, it said more about like how God had grown us and pruned us through the roller coaster of ministry and church planning and that kind of thing. And so like it was eye-opening to how God had grown us, I guess. Yeah. And so like that meant a lot to me.
Same person, one of the conversations we had while at work, she's like, oh yeah, I wasn't surprised to see you and John at that thing. You guys are helpers. Yeah. And I was like, what does that mean? And she goes, well, you're just people who are there to help. And I was like, I just saw this as what you, like, I've always just seen it as like, well, this is what you do. This is what God says you do, so you do it. And it's not like I'm doing it out of an act of not thinking, mindless obedience. It's just, we had done it, I guess, at that point for so long that it was like, well, this is what we do. And for her, she was like, you're helpers. That's what you do. You come and you you serve. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that was for the most part, I would say that, I mean, I had a lot of fun for the most part doing it.
It was fun.
There was really hard, difficult. There was some remarkably hard and difficult things. There are things that I would think that I would do differently, that we would do differently. But for the most part, I kind of enjoyed the chaos of everything.
I like organization and order. I enjoy organization, planning, and order. But I will say, going through, because like I know you're trying to talk about the positive, but going through a lot of the negative things that we did has because right now to some degree we're learning how to just be church members.
Yeah,
it has definitely opened my eyes to go, okay, here's how you love a pastor and his wife.
Yeah,
here's how you love their family. Here's how you serve the church. This is how we serve as leaders in the church. How you served as the pastor, how I served in that hospitality role. Here's how I can teach the others to do those things. This is what it looks like. And then you're a little more sensitive to, yeah, it looks like the pastor and his wife are tired. And they're not just sleepy. Like, they're tired. Or, man, they seem down today. Where most church members might not see it. And so it definitely highlights those things, and you're able to act on them. And so I hope for sure that we are able to carry that into being great, like, church members, loving the body of Christ that we've been put in. But yeah.
For people who are listening who are part of a local church,
mm-hmm.
they are members. They want to. They may not. They want to be they want to be good active members, right?
Yeah.
They want to be faithful to the local body that God's put them in. What are some ways that they can love and minister to their pastor's wife?
Talk to her. Actually talk to her. If she's an introvert, pay attention to whether or not she looks exhausted that day. And if she looks exhausted that day, let her decompress. And don't sit there and go, well, you're supposed to be the pastor's wife. You're supposed to talk. Let her know, hey, it's okay that you're tired and that you don't want to interact today. That's perfectly fine. That's one way you can love your pastor's wife. Text her. Call her. And say, hey, I was praying for you today. How can I continue to pray for you? Or, if they have children, how about we go get coffee and the kids come with us? Because sometimes, especially in the circles that we're in, there's quite a few kids.
Right.
And a lot of times, if you want to go hang out with her, the kids come with her. And that sometimes comes with a burden of, well, I can't sit down and have that conversation. Well, if you, like us, have the ability to just go, make it perfectly clear. You and your children can come and be in this conversation with us. And basically allow her to feel that welcomeness. And if she says no, don't take it personally. Don't, because I've seen this so many times. If you're trying as a woman to reach out to the pastor's wife and she's like, no, I can't do that. No, I don't. She doesn't answer your text message. She doesn't call you back. Like, grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. Because I've been on that side, and that one phone call is 5 or 6 more to her.
Yeah.
And you think you're the only one texting and calling. But if she misses yours, you pile grace, because she's probably answered 10 other ones. Or if she's got children, she's probably chasing a child who's now throwing his diaper off as he runs down the hallway during community group. Like, grace, so much grace. And that goes for the pastor too. But like, get your mind off of you and get your mind on serving and serve her. And don't go, well, she didn't answer me, or she didn't call me back, or she never meets with me. Like, what else is going on there?
Yeah.
So.
Because I know that for the member of the church who understands that the church goes beyond a weekly meeting.
Yeah.
For the person who understands that, like, or is understanding and growing understanding, like, the church is a local community of people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have an awareness that the pastor has a challenging job.
Yeah.
A challenging life.
That's if he doesn't
trying to like be a husband, be a father, being a pastor, and also just being a person. They understand that it is challenging.
Yeah.
And that it is exhausting. People tend to forget that his wife carries a lot as well.
Oh, yeah.
And
I learned that.
Yeah. And some of the things that he carries heavily, she carries more heavily.
The weight is heavier.
The weight is heavier sometimes.
Well, yeah.
And it's not known.
Yeah.
Especially if there is difficult things going on that require maybe just challenges with people, dealing with sin and all those different kind of things. She may not know, but she knows.
Yeah.
And sometimes pastors get done dirty, and he may be dealing with that, but when her husband gets done wrong,
if something's done against your husband, it is, and we know this from experience, it is very hard. It is very hard for me personally as the wife to go, I forgive you, we're moving on. Yeah. Especially if you're in a small town and you have to see him over and over again. Yeah. Internally, you're battling that sin. I honestly think it's harder when, rightfully so, as a pastor, someone's attacked you, and out of confidentiality, you cannot share that. Right. And out of care for me, right, you don't share that. Yeah. But here you are, praying that you have other men, I'm praying you have other men feeding into you and that you are leaning into God, because you're then to carry that on your own. And that comes out towards, not negatively towards me, but your personalities change. You act different. You carry that stress. Your quietness and reservation in that, rightfully so, comes out in other aspects of life. Yeah. And the wife and children take that on. Yeah. And so in your care for your wife and children, it still happens. So that ripple effect of sin is always going to be there in some way. And to some degree, that's almost worse, because you're I don't know what's ailing him. I'm going to pray towards that. And then I'm going to, again, put grace on that, because when you're frustrated and you potentially say something that I know wasn't meant to be said in that way, I'm grace in that. Don't get angry. There's something more to this.
And so occasionally, the pastor's wife needs people, she needs care as well. And she needs people checking in on her. Yes. And just basically people to be just paying attention. Mm-hmm. Not to be forgotten. Yeah. 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 So on a completely different note, talk about your heart and passion for homesteading.
Oh yeah, homesteading? Yeah. Well, I'm not sure how much they can see, but
they don't. That's fine.
Yeah. There's about 50 tomato plants in our backyard right now because reasons. But I have a desire to shoot for self-sufficiency, to grow stuff, to learn how to do that, to just to learn something. Because if we want to go down that rabbit hole of if the world ends, I'm not the one that's going out there and hunting. I'm not going to be the
if
one.
civilization crumbles.
Yeah. Like, sorry, if civilization crumbles, if the world ends, I'm not worried about any of this. But like, if civilization crumbles, let's think about that. I'm not the one that's going out and hunting and gathering. I am going to embrace my role as the homemaker, right? But in that theory, like, or along that same vein is, as women get older, like, I'm not going to be the person that say we have less values, but like, we're not able to do the same things that we're able to do.
Yeah.
We're not able, society, as broken as the view of it is, like, our value goes down. Well, forget all of that. Maybe I can't go and do those things. Maybe I can't do the things I used to be able to do, but I'm going to have a skill. I'm going to have an ability that I can lean into. I'm going to have something more about me that isn't just like, I have a pretty face, or I can speak eloquently, because I can't. I'm going to have something. And so I'm learning how to grow vegetables. And you know what? In our abundance, we will give it away.
Yeah.
I am learning how to make things from scratch. I'm learning how to bake, which there's a funny story behind that. And so just learning how to be self-sufficient, learning how, and like, I have this weird love for water stills. One day, we're going to have a water still, which, if you don't know what a water still is, it's basically I need two hands for this. It's basically this little box that's about that big, that has a piece of glass, and it's all painted on the inside, and has a little line on the glass, and the water condensates and drips down, and you get water. Basically, if you ever lose water, you can just rely on the water still. So all you preppers out there who have gallons upon gallons upon gallons, when you run out of water and you can't go get more water, you better have a water still. So anyways, I have a weird love for that. Can't wait to build that one day. Yeah, so just having this self-sufficiency about me, this something more than, to talk about, to do, something interesting. And then again, tying that into, I have 50 tomato plants. If all goes well and God blesses the garden, we're going to have more tomatoes than we're going to know what to do with. And guess what I get to do? I get to bring them to church, and I get to give them away. And that's going to be amazing. But the funny story is, I learned how to make sourdough bread. And I wish I could say it was from a desire to actually want to know how to make sourdough bread. But it wasn't. As we got more and more into the Reform circles, there's this understanding, this unwritten rule that I stumbled upon in the women's circles of things, where it's like, oh, you're a Reformed woman? Do you have 6 children and know how to make sourdough bread? And I'm like, no, I don't have either of those things, but I can learn how to make sourdough bread. And I'm talking like, it wasn't just one. It was like 6, 7 people in the course of like a month. Like, can you make bread? Do you know how to make sourdough bread? And I'm like, no, I don't. And I was like, all right, fine. Let me prove that I can be a Reformed woman. So I will make sourdough bread. And you know what? I kept it alive for a year. And then we went on vacation, or I went on a vacation for a week, and it got left on the counter and no one fed it, and it died.
Yep.
A year's worth of work. That was frustrating. So anyways, yeah, homesteading would be awesome. If we can go get a large chunk of land and start getting cows and chickens and pigs and veggies. That'd be cool. Be alive. Anyways.
So what is your favorite video game right now?
So at the moment, Zelda.
Yeah.
It is all about Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and it just came out, and I'm obsessed with it. Yeah, I know, there's shrines. Yes, shrines. Yes, I know. Whatever. It's a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed video games. So,
I said this the other day on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, but
Yeah, you did.
I always thought Zelda was the guy.
Yeah, it's not the guy. Which it's one of the few.
Well, it's not called like Super Peach Brothers. It's called Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, that wouldn't have sold well. Super Peach Brothers. Yeah, it is one of the few video games though where there's still a damsel to be rescued.
Few.
I can't name any other ones
Seriously?
off the top of my head. I mean, the goal of it is Link searches for the princess.
No, yeah.
And they save the kingdom.
I just didn't know they got rid of all the damsels.
I mean, apparently, we haven't watched it, but apparently in a new Mario movie, Peach was pretty self-sufficient.
Huh. Well, then what's the point?
Right. What's the point? So, Zelda, you still save the damsel.
What level are you on?
There's no levels. There's only hearts and stamina wheels.
So, like, how far are you? Do you know?
I'm probably not even 25% through this game. It's an open world game. So if you would like, you can follow the storyline and try to speed run it, or you can go get a horse and run around on the trails for 5 hours and never proceed forward.
That's probably what I would do.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have anything you want to add?
Well, there's so much.
Yeah.
We can always do a fill-in in the future where we dive into some frustrations of the women in the church, but that's a soapbox I can talk for hours on.
We can do that for the second one.
Yeah.
If you decide you want to do the second one.
Yeah.
After you've done the
editing. The failure of the women in the church.
Well, thank you all, everybody, for joining us. As always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell. Any questions or comments you have, if you haven't already dropped them, go ahead and put them down in the comments. Like we said, we'll leave some links and references to some of the stuff that Emily had mentioned. But until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Mm-hmm.